how many participants? We have 15. I think let's record. Okay, it is 12:30 in Washington, D.C., 11:30 in Guatemala. And I would like to welcome all participants to this Aviation Solutions Area webinar. We usually call them brown bag lunch because people used to bring brown bags with their lunch at midday to a meeting room where we had a little meeting conference seminar. Today it's a webinar. I am very pleased. I'm really very pleased to today introduce the Aeroclub of Guatemala. And I am pleased, I'm giving you a disclaimer right at the beginning for good governance. I'm not only a big fan of the Aeroclub and impressed about their work, I'm also a member since over 10 years. I'm an aviator, as many of you know, and I also fly in Guatemala. And I have been following the development of the air transport sector in Guatemala. We had a program about 12 years ago, a DPL, where Guatemala attained its Category 1 FAA certification under Jose Manuel Moreno Potran as Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority. He is with us today. And Guatemala also is the country with the largest general aviation community in any developing or emerging country of the world. It held the record at one point of the country with the most private helicopters per population. At the same moment, of course, Guatemala is a country that has its challenges, both with poverty, with development, but also, as we will talk about, with natural disasters. The objective today is also to talk about air transportation and bring to you the aspects of general aviation. What is general aviation? General aviation is basically all these aircraft that don't serve in an airline or don't serve in a commercial operation or for state or military. It is basically private aircraft. It is aircraft that are used for business. And the notion often, and in a way even more in Europe, is that these are aircraft of the rich and famous. They are dangerous, they pollute, and they also disturb the airlines that because they are slow and clog traffic. That all that is not the case is hard to sort of argue, but general aviation more and more has a very important function in terms of providing new pilots, because pilots of the airlines usually came from the air forces, and there are less and less Air Force pilots. However, today we are talking about a very important role that the Aeroclub of Guatemala just played in responding to natural disasters. And it is not the first time. It has happened several times where general aviation in Guatemala immediately responded and took over a very important role in supporting the state and distributing urgently needed supplies and medical equipment to remote communities and even saving people. And that is an example that we shouldn't just ignore. It is good news, which is always hard to sell, but it is something that we at the World Bank, when we look at development, we look at development initiatives in our client countries in the aviation sector, we should think about. With this, let me just quickly present to you our panel today. We have Jorge Castellanos, who is the current president of the Aeroclub of Guatemala. He is an aviator since many, many years. He also, in his private endeavor, is a CEO of a textile company. Guatemala is actually producing textiles, maquiladoras, as some of you might know, and he is CEO of such a company. We then have Jose Moreno Potran, who I know since many, many years. As I said, he was the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority of Guatemala about 12 years ago. He has also been president of the Aeroclub, and also he, in his private life, is working in a large sugar production enterprise. He is an active pilot, both fixed wing and helicopter pilot, and also was involved in the activities we will discuss. Finally, we have Captain Ludin, who is an aviator since over 42 years. He beat me by 4 years. Missionary pilot. In America, we would call that a bush pilot, somebody who really flies into areas that nobody else can fly in. He's a flight instructor, an examiner, a mechanic, and he will bring us some aspects of the activities we did in terms of the view of the pilot. The objective is not only to hear about the sensational engagement of the Aeroclub in terms of operations, it is also then to ask ourselves, what can we do when in a month or two or in a year we are with the Ministry of Transport in one of our developing countries, client countries, and we are discussing natural disaster preparedness, and we are talking about air transportation. And remember that seminar, what are the issues? Finally, my colleague Rohan Saar, who is a young professional at the World Bank, he will present the activities that the World Bank, the project, is preparing right now in response of the 2 hurricanes that we are talking about. He will talk about Honduras and the Nicaraguan projects. With this, I am giving the word to Jorge Castellanos, and he has a presentation. Jorge, I will try to actually manage the presentation because I copied it to a PowerPoint. Let me, in this case, share the screen, and hopefully that will work as advertised.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay. So, okay, do you see the full presentation now?
Yes, we see partial, a small picture.
Charles, can you go to display setting and then choose?
Okay, that's the challenges of.
Yes, click display setting.
Yeah.
And then choose duplicate.
Screen number 2. This is the PowerPoint here. Let me see. That works?
Yes.
Now we have the full screen.
Yes.
Okay, Jorge, you just tell me next. Now we'll go through. These are 22 slides. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Charles, very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm the president of the Aeroclub de Guatemala. During the Eta and Iota hurricanes, we started Puente Aéreo, they call it in Spanish, which is bringing food for the people that are incommunicated because the roads were down, the rivers were flooded, a lot of communities were incommunicated. So we do it in small general aviation airplanes donated by their owners, the pilots. The Aeroclub just funds the gasoline for the helicopters, the planes, and is managed by donations. Everybody is a voluntary help. So these are the operations from the first day. You can see here, there are small propeller airplanes, privately owned. Next, please. During these hurricanes, we were affected the north part of the country, which is Huehuetenango, Quiché, Alta Verapaz, Petén, and Izabal. Izabal is the eastern part of northeastern part of the country, which goes to the Atlantic Ocean. There's a big rivers there that were completely flooded. Alta Verapaz is a very mountainous area, with small and dirt roads, which were completely devastated. So those, the farther to the east were the most damaged departments that were from these hurricanes. Quiché is also a very mountainous area with bad roads, but there is no infrastructure. There are no airports, there's nothing there. So it was complicated to operate there. In Izabal, Petén, and Alta Verapaz, there's small airstrips that we use for the general aviation and for the helicopters, where we had to refuel and we had all the supplies to deliver. Next, please. You can see here, this pond is over a community. The helicopter just made, the people, they made an heliport. You can see that there are small houses that are sunk, and all these people had to climb to the mountains, and they lost everything, their houses, their crops, everything. The infrastructure, the really bad infrastructure that they have, which are roads, that are dirt roads, are not usable because of the flooded, and it's really chaotic. Next. You can see here more pictures from the damage. All the rivers, they were flooded, overflown. The banana plantation, you can see the roads that they were covered by mud. The rivers, everything was destroyed. And when the government gave the warning, they were focusing on the eye of the storm, but the rain was the one that caused the most damage, because all the rain, that it was incredible how much water we flew over there. It was amazing how many waters was displaced in these communities, and it took days for it to come down, and all these communities lost everything. Next, please. This was the first flight on November the 6th, and with the we did it with the government. They gave us the things to deliver, because we didn't have we opened a centro de acopio, they call it here. It's where you receive all the food that is to be delivered to these people. But on the first day, we were in contact with the government, because they needed the airplanes, and they had the things to deliver. So this is the first flight. Next. In here, you can see the CONREDIS, the National to Reduce Disasters, and they don't have airplanes. They only have the things to deliver the food. So we started working with them. You can see here, those are the people with our planes, from the members that they donated their time and their pilots to do all this. Next. We work with the Ministerio de Desarrollo, with the Ministry of Development, the Ministry of Social Development, and with the Air Force, the local Air Force. This was some of the pictures from the people, from the pilots, that they delivered these goods to these communities, to the airstrips, where later on they were delivered by helicopter. Next. This is part of we have the hangars in the city where we receive all this food, and all voluntary people, they came and they classify it to have each bag delivered to a family. You can see there that it's labeled 20. It means it's 20 pounds. So we know when we cargo the plane, how many bags. If you can carry 500 pounds, you carry 25 bags. So that's the way we control the weight and balance. Next, please. We were helping during 30 days with this disaster. These are more of the volunteers bringing food to the people on small planes, propeller airplanes from general aviation. All voluntary. Next. These are the helicopters that will pick all the goods from the small airstrips and deliver them to the communities, to the people. This is barely 1 day, a day and a half after the impact. So we are really efficient to come when the people needed the most, because on the first days they lost everything. They were flooded, their house was flooded. They couldn't get buy things or get food to their communities because the roads are completely devastated. So it's really important to have these people, because there's families, all communities are with children, women, pregnant. It's a really bad situation for them. Next. You can see all the bags that are put into the helicopters or the fixed wing, and all this is donated by the members of the Aeroclub, their pilots and the helicopters. Next. This is you can see the people, they organize a line to take all the donation. They will label they will put the trees and everything out of, clean the area and put an H with some white stuff. And then the helicopter will know where to land. So they will receive all this help, the food for their families. So they were really pleased. You can see this is very poor people. And with all this disaster, there's gonna be more poverty to the area. Next. The cost of the operation is $2,994,554 quetzales, which is around $400,000 that was donated by if you were to put a cost to all the hours, 600 hours of flight and airplane cost, this is what was donated and was used. It's a huge amount of money but it's not something that is like really bad. Next. We transferred to this Petén, which is the northern department of Guatemala. We had over 7,337 pounds were delivered to Poptún and the southern part of Petén, which was the most devastated by the flooding. Next. In Izabal, which is the most eastern department of Guatemala, we deliver 307,705 pounds to the municipios is called, which the small departments is Puerto Barrios, Livingston, and Morales. And all these communities, which is, you can see, these are all the people. Next. This is how we operated from these small airstrips. We brought our own fuel and we fueled the helicopters. So they will jump back and forth to the community. So they were more efficient. They didn't have to come back to the city. They will stay during the whole day, work for 7-8 hour shifts when the weather permitted, because it kept on raining for several days. Some days we couldn't fly because the weather was really bad. And you cannot fly when it's raining or the visibility is really bad. So we had our own fuel and we're completely independent from the government. And all these are the names of the communities that we help, which there are a lot of people, a lot of families, and a lot of, we also, on the first day, we had helicopters based there that they were rescuing people because there weren't many people on the roofs. There were many on the hills that they needed to be extracted from the area. Next. In Alta Verapaz, we had 110,074 pounds delivered to all these communities. We were able to take some by truck, some by airplane to Cobán, which is the capital of the department, and then from there in helicopters to all these communities, which are, some are still incommunicated. The roads are still bad. The flooding has not stopped. And you can see all these places they were devastated by the flooding. Next. These are pictures from the people flying into Coban, the members, the pilots. They bring rescue firemen to search for people. The army helped in Coban to bring the stuff to the helicopters. These are the communities, the kids, everybody got involucrated. The heliports, they were habilitated by the communities because that's the only way they could receive the food. Next. In Quiché, which is we have 3 municipals that we were attending, is Nevar, Chajul, and San Juan Cotzal. In Quiché, was delivered 34,660 pounds to these people, that they are mainly indigenous, that they live in the community. All these are the Huehuetenango is another where they were injured people that we translated. In there, the roads were habilitated most of the time, so they could continue with their commerce. Next. This is what we did this time in the Aeroclub de Guatemala. We are very happy that we had over 600 hours of flight and we had no incidents. Even the weather was really bad, and we really like to thank everybody that trusted with their funds to pay for the fuel, and the pilots and the owners of the aircraft that was used during this event.
Thank you very much, Jorge. This was a very impressive presentation. Let me just summarize 3 or 4 facts here. After devastating impact of first one and then a second hurricane, the General Aviation Aeroclub responded with 55 aircraft, 21 helicopters, transporting over 500,000 pounds of supplies, flying 600 hours. Those 600 hours valued at $400,000, that's just the fuel. Mobilizing them, you didn't talk much about. You also mobilized donations. You went to the press, you called companies, with your business relationship, you fundraised supplies, and people responded. What also is impressive, and that leads me to Jose Manuel, is that the authorities right away connected. In most pictures, you see the military. You see that General Aviation is completely integrated into the response of the country. Guatemala has a very small air force. They have a few airplanes, few helicopters. They are not able to respond. This is remarkable. This is something, an asset that is well used in such a difficult times. And that's something, a lesson learned for us that is very important in other countries. But what really is important is how to coordinate with the authorities, with the army, with the ministry that responds, with the organizations. And I think that's something that Jose Manuel will talk about right now, because he wears both hats. He had the head of Director Civil Aviation and of Aeroclub. Jose Manuel, the floor is yours. You need to unmute.
I'm sorry. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Charles, for this great opportunity. What can I tell? The Aeroclub, which is per capita the second largest in the world in terms of aircraft within the population, over the time has tried to maintain a very good relationship with the DGAC, which is the Aviation Authority. The relationship with the current Director General is very, very good, because he comes from General Aviation and understands it as a General Aviation pilot. the relationship of the Aeroclub with the Army and especially of the country's Air Force is very good. And we have worked very well for decades. This is because it is an institutionally relationship, regardless of who the people are in charge, both at the Aeroclub and in the Army. What can I say about, unfortunately, the relationship with the government entity in charge of disaster prevention and reduction occurs just only when there are natural disasters. This is due to the fact that with each change of government, there are changes in personnel who leave behind the experiences and everything that has been worked. Why does the Aeroclub have such a prompt and enormous response in times of natural emergency? Is because protocols have been developed over time based on previous experiences. The biggest difference in this last emergency was technology and social networks. People affected for the first time send us not just photographs of the places, but also coordinates of their location. And on our part, instructions and requirements were set to them so that those affected will build landing areas, heliports. The Aeroclub is ready again. It's all the time ready with a reserve of fuel and an economic fund for the purchase of groceries with which the operation begins. Waiting for the donations of the Guatemalans to continue as long as necessary and the donations flow. Right now, the credibility of the Aeroclub in this country is very good. Why? Because donors know perfectly that what they give us, we deliver directly to the hands of the most affected and needy people. An important thing, why don't our neighbor countries have a general aviation like Guatemala? That's very important. It is because for several decades, governments decided over time to impose high taxes on aircraft and spare parts, and as well as excessive cost of parking and workshop areas, thus making general aviation prohibitive and thus non-existent. Countries like Guatemala need to have a national airport system that really communicates and connects all the departments. That were World Bank entries. Entities like World Bank can help us a lot, not only with the financing of airports and runways in all departments of the country. We need from the World Bank an agreement with the government, not also to develop an airport master plan for the construction of landing strips in the country in the medium term. And it's very important that the execution of this master plan must be completely isolated from politics, regardless of the plans of its government, so it can be carried out because to become a reality. If you leave the responsibility to the government, every 4 years it will be here a new government with totally different ideas. So we need an entity like World Bank to develop this airport system.
I think you raised some very important points here. When I started this session, I said that general aviation is often seen, the toys of the rich and famous. And many countries in Europe and some in Central America, they just want to tax it out to existence. I remember from my own experience that in Costa Rica, a 24-hour parking is about $250 per day for a small aircraft in the general aviation airport of the capital. In Honduras, if you land and take passengers and fly out again, it's about $250 to $300. While in Guatemala, it's a very small fee, thanks, of course, to the lobbying of the Aeroclub. And that is a problem because general aviation is not of the rich and famous only. General aviation is a tool. The other thing is, what is very important, what you mentioned, is the national airport system or air transport system. We are in many countries financing master plans where we discuss with a government, how should your sector look like? But too often this is a report that ends on a shelf, and with that, nobody takes notice. What we are pushing for now is, sometimes we call it white paper, sometimes we call it the official policy of a government concerning air transport. And that is to take the master plan and then discuss it in parliament and endorse it. Once it is endorsed, and most countries have it, my country, Switzerland, has it, the United States have it, then it becomes policy of the government. And regardless if the government changes, we have a 10-year plan for aviation, we have a 10-year plan for health, a 10-year plan for education. So that is an important work that I have to say has not always been carried through enough from the World Bank. We finance a study and that's it. No, we need to go with implementation. The third thing, of course, also is if we finance and we help countries in providing financing for infrastructure, we also need to ensure that a certain policy reigns and that includes all the users. And again, general aviation is one of these users. I've spoken enough. Before I hand over to Captain Ludin, for any question, comments, ideas, please use the chat function. We'll collect these questions and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. We have heard what the Aeroclub of Guatemala performed. We have heard about the issues, the link to the government, the necessity to coordinate, to also prepare plans for disasters. And Rohan will talk about what the World Bank does in other countries. But I want to first have some aspects of a flyer who knows the country very well, who was landing in different sites. And I think your presentation will answer the question or will give some light on the issue. Well, what should be improved? How could the sector, or how could general aviation function better in such a responding to disaster? Do we need better infrastructure? Do we need, I don't know, from the views of an aviator, what in terms of developing the sector would be helpful? Captain Ludin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Charles, for this opportunity. And I feel great responsibility to be in front of these cameras here because I'm part of Aeroclub of Guatemala, but behind the Aeroclub, in order to provide all this help, were many people involved in that. Many companies, many individuals putting their money, putting their equipment to be used, and many pilots volunteers. And our organization is called AGAPE, Asociación Guatemalteca Aérea para Edificación. It's an organization that was established back in 1976 after the big earthquake in Guatemala in response to another disaster where in our country there. So it's not and mainly our activity is a religious organizations, and our activity has been mainly working in the most isolated areas. And aviation, when we talk about general aviation, I always read a lot of articles against the people that have airplanes, and they are written by people who have the ability to use airplanes to see in the city, but none of those articles have been coming from the people that receive the help when they are in the other side of the mountains, when they have used this kind of small airplanes to overcome the mountains and bring these sick people to the cities. So I understand that. So I have no regrets when I read that. So I understand it's a lack of understanding how general aviation can help a developing country, especially the people in the most isolated areas where there is no roads. I don't see those articles too very often, unless it's written by a missionary pilot or a missionary family. This is in the jungles in Brazil or in the other side of the big mountain that you can overcome that mountain by walking 2 days. It's kind of hard. So how is general aviation important for us in our developing countries is very important. It's a very useful tool. It's the only way doctors can make it to those small villages where there is no doctors. We usually fly a lot of medical teams, mainly from missionary organizations or community development organizations want to work in those areas. And we use, sometimes we are not able to use twin engine airplanes because the airships are built by hand by the people there. So we use small single engine aircrafts. And in our organization, we cannot work alone. We are here in Guatemala working with the help of Aeroclub of Guatemala. And we kind of work under the umbrella of the Aeroclub. If we wouldn't be part of the Aeroclub, I think we couldn't have a hangar in Guatemala City. We cannot afford that. Our resources are limited. And that's why we are pilots and instructors and mechanics at the same time in our small organization. And we are affiliated with other organizations like Mission Aviation Fellowship, organizations that do in order to maintain high standards of maintenance and flying. These organizations like MAF and JARS and Winds of Blessings, Missionary Air Group, that we are part of that. And we are forming a consortium of organizations to work together. So everybody puts their own skills and their own resources to make it happen. And part of that is the Aeroclub. In this situation right now with this event of the two hurricanes hitting at the same time, Central America, it was interesting to see the logistic. I don't think that Aeroclub made a call for everybody to come and help, but when they made a call, it was a lot of people already knocking at the door saying how we can help. We had to find organizations or individuals or one person who is going to be the catalyst to make it happen there. There's so many people that participated in that, from students from the university, mechanics, truck drivers, people in the office making that organization happen. And we kind of concentrate everything in the Aeroclub Guatemala under the leadership of Jorge Castañeda. But we were able to go there knowing that we are going to be, our skills were going to be utilized, our resources are going to be utilized in the right way. And they had the connections with the military personnel, with the government. We just went over there to do what we know how to do best. So in our situation, in our small organizations, we feel like we don't want to be a big organization. We want to be an organization that is able to work in cooperation, or sign agreements with other organizations that they know what they are doing, like mechanics, like people in the education, health programs. We do that, and the Aeroclub has been a great help to us. The Aeroclub and the Círculo Aéreo of Guatemala is a lot of pilots that are willing to participate. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here with you, because Guatemala has been blessed by this group of people working in general aviation with desire of participate. I would say part of my joy in this struggle that we had is seeing how many people were able to bring, and with no interest, just to the desire to help, put their resources together, their skills together, to ease up the pain of our brothers in the most isolated areas. There is a lot of videos over there with friends flying the helicopters, rescuing people from the roofs of some of the houses, some of the trees. We were able to participate with them. And I would say one of the things that we need in our countries like Guatemala is have a better understanding what general aviation is. It's always linked that it's just a luxury. It's like when you have a car, you can have a Toyota cost $2,000, or you can have a Maserati that costs $500,000. It's gonna be utilized. So we need that general aviation. Our purpose in our small organization is to reach the most isolated areas with education, health programs, leadership training for for the development of the next generation who are going to take over the communities or the countries. So I want to say, I can mention a lot of organizations here, and we had the opportunity after flying for 6 days after the hurricane, we were called by a missionary, Mission Aviation Fellowship to help them in Honduras. It was a totally different environment there. We came from an environment where everybody was participating, 35 airplanes, I could see them, and many, many helicopters flying. We went to a place in Honduras to fly into the coast in the Caribbean side, La Mosquitia. We know that area pretty well. We have been flying for missionaries there. But just landing there, it took us 2.5 hours to clear customs. The following day, it was another calvary there, because we had an airplane coming from the United States with a lot of food, help. It was interesting. It took a day to clear the food, and we had airplanes ready to fly that that mainly food for those villages. We had to wait there, and then the other part that we had is we had the second wave. I mean, the second hurricane coming to hit us. Iota was coming 2 days later. By the time we were able to clear customs for us, our 2 airplanes, and the airplane that came from the United States, it took 2.5 days. By that time, we had 1 day left before Iota hit again. So we worked there for 15 days. 2 airplanes from Guatemala. And this is sad to say, I didn't see any other Honduran airplane from General Aviation doing the work that we are doing. And later on, we had another help from our sister organization, from Missionary Aviation Fellowship, coming from Kodiak, from United States to Nicaragua, and another 206 from our Alas de Socorro in Mexico. It took us 5 days for them to issue a permit to fly there. By the time the Kodiak was 5 minutes before entering Nicaragua territory, we had no permission to enter there. So finally, they cleared us just right a couple of minutes before they reached the border. So sometimes I felt like it was when you're trying to drive a car with the parking brake on. That's what I felt when I left Guatemala and when I worked for the other countries in Central America. It's not just one parking brake. It was like 3-4 parking brakes trying to move forward. So I think there is a major change that need to be taking place in how we approach disasters. There is a lot of energy, a lot of resources can put together. And this is my experience being a pilot. Being a pilot is you are managing energy, you are managing resources. When you have an engine failure and you are 1,000 feet, you don't have too much time to go through all the manuals, but you have knowledge how you're going to act, because you have to put the airplane safe on the ground. So we need people that understand the context where they are working. I know the government has a lot of procedures, but sometimes those procedures, you have to go through all of them. You have to have people with brains, where direction you go, because you don't have too much time to respond to an emergency. So general aviation for me has been a blessing for Guatemala, and I hope continues being a blessing in the future, and also not just to develop in the future generation. You can reach all those isolated places with a small airplane. And we have done that. I have done that for the last 40 years. And I have seen how we been able to participate in a small way to developing these communities there. And I could say with our participation and help of Aeroclub of Guatemala and many other organizations, when we left Guatemala and went to Honduras and the other organizations, I can give you an statistics here with Missionary Aviation Fellowship put together. We were able to do 137 flight legs, 207 flight hours in Honduras and Guatemala and Nicaragua, 255 passengers moved, and 38,400 pounds of help, medicine, and food delivered. And we were able to fly in working coordination with 20 other organizations, non-government organizations. So the energy and the resources are there. So in Guatemala, we had the blessing to have the Aeroclub because that was the logistic. We concentrate everything there and make it happen quick. And I'm talking here with the Aeroclub, and I'm glad to be able to share with you what God allows us to do together.
Thank you very much, Captain Ludin. This was very impressive. And I think what struck me the most is when you compared the experience in Guatemala compared with what you experience as a pilot on the ground in Honduras and Nicaragua. And it really shows the importance of coordinating and having the link to the authorities. We'll come back to that in the Q&A session. I remind everybody that you can put your questions in the chat. But now the question is, what does the World Bank do? And we happen to respond to these two hurricanes in Nicaragua and Honduras. I have to say that our colleagues from the disaster management unit are completely absorbed, but Rohan Shah, who is a young professional at the Latin American Caribbean Transport Unit, has put together a quick summary of the World Bank's intervention in Honduras and Nicaragua, and everybody is invited to criticize it and to give us your input, because we learn from you. We don't know it all. So please, Rohan, could you, you have a presentation. You want to share the presentation on the screen directly, or shall I do it?
Either ways, Charles, if you have it open, feel free. Yeah.
So you can share the screen.
Okay. Yeah. Just give me one.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me make sure. Share screen. Let me know when you see it. Just want to make sure.
But go in full presentation mode.
Better?
Perfect. Now it's perfect. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Charles, and thank you for putting this together. And welcome to our friends from the Aeroclub of Guatemala. Bienvenidos. Very impressive efforts. I hope I'm the only non-pilot on the panel, so I won't have any aerial insights, but hopefully share some terrestrial things that the World Bank is trying to do. So as Charles mentioned, this is our DRM colleagues immediately got into action when they received requests from the governments of Honduras and Nicaragua after the first hurricane Eta, which was closely followed by Iota, and they started putting together emergency operations, emergency relief operations. And I'm the focal point from the transport side, because transport sector was also severely damaged in terms of roads and bridges. So I just wanted to share some insights and solicit feedback, and at the same time try and complement some of these efforts. So the basic approach was to do fast track preparation of two projects, one in Honduras and one in Nicaragua, under some condensed procedures of the World Bank to kind of expedite the preparation and expedite the delivery. It was a multi-sector effort. It was originally led by our DRM, Disaster and Urban Disaster Resilience Unit, but it's a lot of cross support from environment, social, blue economy, and transport as well. The operations were mainly designed from point of view of good international best practices and foundational and fundamental DRM objectives, which was one, and this is beyond just emergency relief. but to also strengthen long-term DRM governance for the government in terms of capacity building, and at the same time also invest in better preparedness for future emergencies, and strengthen the resilience towards such events in those countries. Uh, so just to kind of give a little more context, we heard from the Aeroclub in Guatemala, but just from the ground, at least in Honduras and Nicaragua, neighboring countries, the damage was quite severe. The impact was very far-reaching, spanned a lot of sectors in a very short period of time. So in Honduras, both in Honduras, Nicaragua, we have at least 3 million people who were impacted in some way or form. In terms of sectors, we had tremendous impact on housing, almost over 80 to 100,000 housing units being destroyed, transport, hundreds of bridges either completely destroyed or at least severely damaged, or facing some sort of a loss of connectivity. And agriculture, a huge area of arable land was also destroyed, which is a significant impact for agribusinesses in the country. Nicaragua likewise, but on top of these infrastructure sectors, there was also substantial impacts on wildlife, on aquatic life and coastal habitats, which exacerbate the climate change risks for the region. And just to give a broader context, these happen as the countries were reeling from the effects or recovering from the effects of COVID. So it's almost a double or triple economic shock for these particular countries. On the right, we received some guidance from our, or some preliminary estimates from our UN colleagues on the ground in terms of the departments or municipalities that were affected. So as you can see, a majority of the departments in Honduras, Guatemala, and Nicaragua closer to the coastal line, closer to the coastal belt, were severely impacted. So just with that context in mind, in terms of what the project specifically aims to achieve, I'd like to share some insights from Honduras. The project in Nicaragua, the project in Honduras is a little bit farther along, so I thought that'd be more interesting to share. But the idea and the intervention logic is similar. So in terms of components of the project, the key, the first and foremost was emergency relief and quick response and safety operations to enhance, to make sure we limit the loss of life and property. It included evacuations, provision of temporary housing, at the same time renting out equipment for transport, and combined with distribution of essential supplies, food items, non-food items, personal protective equipment or PPEs to affected populations. Moving a little bit deeper into the intervention, on top of the initial quick response or emergency relief, the goal was also to enhance the long-term sustainability and to put in place some sustainable build back better BBB principles into the process, and sort of encourage or set the foundation for a resilient recovery and reconstruction of high priority public and community infrastructure areas, which include schools, hospitals, funding for roads, bridges, government offices, all kinds of critical public and community infrastructure that are required for the economy. The priority list is still being developed, but we are the DRM team is in close coordination with the government and the project implementation unit to finalize, or to at least come up with a list of priority infrastructure rehabilitations that need to be made. It also includes engineering assessments, designs, and civil works. And finally, last but not least, in addition to rebuilding, the project also aims to build long-term capacity and provide institutional support to the governments in terms of recovery planning, in terms of long-term resiliency building, and project management capacity as well. Also includes effective communication, dissemination of knowledge, and at the same time encourage put in place programs that are more long-term and not just limited to short-term disaster relief. So with that in mind, what are some expected results, or what are we trying to achieve, or what do we expect to see on the ground once these are in place? So one foremost is definitely sustain livelihoods, safety, provide emergency relief services. At the same time, be more enhance the inclusivity of these programs. Make sure indigenous peoples, women, children, they're all taken into consideration. Restore public services as a key infrastructure in a resilient and sustainable manner. And last but not least, set the foundation or provide for a more inclusive local participation, by making sure all the stakeholders, civil society organizations, community organizations are taken into consideration, and set the foundation for long-term sustainable recovery. So that's it from my end. Happy to hear more perspectives and questions from the panel or the audience.
Thank you very much, Rohan. That was an interesting presentation. What caught my attention was when you mentioned governance and DRM preparedness, which means disaster risk management preparedness. And I think that brings us to the question, or to the issue. What struck me is, again, when Captain Ludin mentioned the difficulties in Nicaragua, Honduras, and on the other side, when Jorge Castellanos presented how they intensively worked with the public sector, with the army, with the authorities, what can be done? What must be done other than facilitating general aviation on a daily basis, which is only done in Guatemala, but in terms of preparing for the next hurricane? Honduras and Nicaragua have nearly no general aviation. And we heard that aircraft from Guatemala went in and flew missions with all the difficulties. What can be done? What should be done in preparation? Who wants to pick up this? Jose Manuel, Jorge, what could Rohan's team in Nicaragua and Honduras, for instance, advise to the government in terms of preparing for the next time? Who wants to pick up that question?
Thank you. If I may, what needs to be proposed to these governments is to help general aviation work all year round, because they're only focused on commercial aviation and big airplanes. But when there's a disaster, you need small airplanes to fly to these communities. You need helicopters. You need to be fast to get to these people. But the hangars are really expensive in Honduras. The rent is expensive. The fuel is expensive. The parts are expensive. People that work in aviation, they need to be well trained, and you need to facilitate these services to the community of aviation to have it alive. Because the governments, they think that only the very extra wealthy people fly in airplanes, but people, like Ludin said, if you're in the other side of the mountains, and it depends, your life depends from this airplane or this helicopter to come and pick you up. If the work from Ludin, many people would have died because they wouldn't get to the hospitals. When you live in a big city where there's hospitals around, you don't see these problems. But when you live in a community that is 10 or 12 hours by foot or by horse, and in an airplane, you can do it in 20, 30 minutes, then your life depends on it. And this is what the government, the politicians need to, they don't live this, but they only is there for 4 years. So they don't, it's not on their main events or what they need to do. But the bank or the governments, they should think about long-term, not only short-term. Like Jose Manuel said, the politicians here, they only think 4 years, but we need to, we have been here for 20 years and we expect to be here for more. We need to have a system from the airport to have the aviation, general aviation and commercial aviation live together for at least 50 years more. We need to plan on 50 years ahead, not only 4 years ahead.
It's a very good point, the long-term planning. Dave McClary asked the same question. Does the World Bank have any plans to present these benefits of general aviation to countries like have been mentioned, who tax and have heavy fees that curtails general aviation, perhaps contrasting what is occurring in Guatemala? Well, the answer is that the few policy dialogues we have with these countries nearly never include general aviation because it's not understood. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's a question about communication, about lobbying. And I only know one Aeroclub in the Americas that does a very good job in communication. And that's the Aeroclub of Guatemala. Google it. You will have many newspapers, television stations who report of general aviation. There they do it. In Europe, maybe in France, there is some communication. But Germany and the rest of Europe, forget it. So I think this is a very, very important point. And this is my message internally, that we need to highlight the importance of general aviation. But now I want to be more specific in my question, because Rohan mentioned governance in disaster risk management. That also means preparedness. I know that most countries in the world prepare emergency plan in case of natural disaster, be it hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfire. And in Guatemala, I think it's CONRED, there are mechanisms in place. So I want to ask you, maybe Jose Manuel, this rapid response, was it facilitated by agreements, communication you had before the emergency? I mean, are the authorities ready to call the Aeroclub in case that there's a natural disaster? I mean, is that pre-discussed and prepared? You're on mute.
On mute, Jose Manuel?
Yes.
Sorry, Charles. First of all, the big question is, what does a government gain by charging high taxes rates to an aviation that no longer exists in that country? Thank you, of course, to having privileged charges, high taxes. So the only way that they will have aviation again is putting that on the table. Regarding to the government institution like CONRED, what can I say? The problem is that every 4 years we have a new government here in Guatemala, and then all the people who work inside of that kind of institutions disappear, and we have a totally new persons there who doesn't know everything about the past and what we have working on. So when a disaster strikes, nobody from the government calls to the Aeroclub. The people who calls the Aeroclub is the people who need the help. And this past emergency was the first time that we have social media, internet, and technology. It was the first time that the people that was suffering in Guatemala start sending messages to the Aeroclub with the exact location and pictures what are they living. So right now, it's the people, the Guatemalans, that call to the Aeroclub to ask for help.
That's interesting. Even though all these pictures show the military and the Aeroclub working hand in hand, and it was just organized on the spot. Jose Manuel, follow-up question. Do you think it would be of value if governments, not only Guatemala, let's say Honduras and Nicaragua, actually have agreements with organizations like the Aeroclub that in case of a natural disaster, like a memorandum of understanding, which is basically a paper that, exchange some principles, but it's not a contract. But do you think that would be helpful? Because that's something in terms of policy, in terms of disaster risk management preparedness, that we should mention when we help these countries prepare for the next disaster.
Yes, it will be very helpful because right now, all the help that our club made is spontaneous, but there is no paper saying it. There's no an agreement, so we don't have anything. It will be very helpful, Charles.
With this, we have a follow-up question. Yes, Jorge, I'll first give it to Jorge, but then we have a follow-up question. Jorge, please.
What is very important is that all our work is made by volunteers. So whenever the pilots they feel comfortable to fly to the area or the weather conditions are good, then they will fly. But we cannot sign an agreement that we will help because we don't know the conditions that are going to be. We are always willing to help. Days we had to park the planes and we couldn't fly. So we have to, and we work during the volunteers mostly. All our volunteers. So we call all our members and say, who's willing to fly to this place and carry the groceries or the goods? And they come and they help. We have a communication with the Air Force and with the military. That's why.
Yes, it's a very good point, Jorge. They're all volunteers. But I want to ask Ludin, because Ludin is in an organization, mission fellowship. Does your organization have an agreement with governments?
No, personally, I don't. My organization, our small organization in Guatemala, we made 2 agreements with past governments to work in health programs over there. And they ended up pulling out of the program. I had to fulfill financially and fill the commitment for the year. So I, as organization, as individual, I don't like to make agreement with the government. That's the understanding, because it's more like a parking brake on to move forward than help. So I would say it's going to be hard. What Jorge was saying is it's going to be hard to commit to go and help them. But if every government make a commitment and say, when there is a disaster, we are going to facilitate the coming of the help that you can give us. Like we went to Honduras. It would have been great if we would have been treated like well, we are with a humanitarian help. We need help. Understanding that the people in the government or the bureaucracy there, understanding why this group of people or these 3 or 4 airplanes are coming to help. No, they had to run it through the whole thing like if we were drug traffickers. They have dogs, they have people checking us out. For every single flight that we did, it was like international flight internally. So there is no understanding. There is no understanding of the context. Why these people are coming and what is going on in their own country. The agreement is going to be kind of hard to do it, but you say we are some agreement that open up a little bit more the borders. I want to tell you an event that was narrated by a Honduran pilot that came and helped to Guatemala. I think he came in a helicopter and he landed wherever they were receiving the people. It was 1 or 2 helicopters came from Honduras and helped over there. And he was so surprised that he came and they took note, the immigration took their name and passport number and probably the license plate of the helicopter. And then 5 minutes later came another guy say, how much food you want, Captain? And here is the food. Are you ready? How much food you're gonna take it? That happened just in a matter of 15 minutes after his arrival. He was not ready to handle that, because that's what happened with when they came to Guatemala. So I see. I can talk a little bit of Honduras and Nicaragua. I mean, just facilitate the coming in and work in there, understanding why these people are coming, whether it's from Guatemala or they are from the United States or any other country, why we are there, just to make it smooth, not to put any more problems. Because the agreement, probably that should be something that is not all the time, but is in moments of these events.
Thank you very much. What I heard is would be reluctant to have an agreement where we commit financially or we are dependent financially from the government and then it pulls out. I understand that. That's not what we need. What we need is an agreement to facilitate our intervention in case of emergency, planning it, informing customs, informing the authorities that Guatemalan airplanes will land in Honduras and help distributing food supply. I think that is a task that would be very helpful. I read you, and that's something we need to keep in mind when working with these countries. Justin has an interesting question. He says, the sad reality is that there's no money to be made in general aviation in some of these countries. There is money to be made in bigger aircraft, business, commercial, etc. Do organizations like AOPA, Aircraft Owners Pilot Association, exist in these countries? How do you get governments to value general aviation when there is no money to be made? Good question. Who wants to pick up that question? Jorge?
Yes, Aeroclub de Guatemala acts as AOPA because we have all the members are pilots and aircraft owners. What happens is that maybe you don't see that we're making money, but we are the industry, the agricultural industry, everybody that flies airplanes, they're providing money for the country, they're paying taxes, and they're creating employees. They're here with they're creating work for people wherever that you can fly, because Charles, you go to Puerto Barrios by car, it's gonna be 8 hours. If you pay an engineer or the general manager, it's gonna be 8 hours to get there, 8 hours to come back. You lose 2 days in a week. If you go by plane, it takes 40 minutes. So we're providing a lot of work for people. If you have an engineer, he can cover the whole country in a small airplane, while in car, it will take him for a month to do it. So there's no money made. You don't need to make money of general aviation, but you're providing work for the people. That is what we need in Guatemala is work. Our people want to work. They don't want to go to the States. Why they go to the States? Because they're looking for work. But we need to create work in Guatemala. In our country, they need work. That's what we need. We don't need welfare. We need work.
Do you think we communicate enough? In other words, I said it's PR, the public sector. I mean, airlines have IATA, and IATA is, very active in public relations and all the themes, climate change, all that. In the United States, AOPA is very active. You as Aeroclub do communicate locally, but in other countries where there are only a few airplanes, there's just not enough people around to communicate, and then they are taxed out of existence by government officials who don't understand the sector. Any reactions on this?
Yes, basically, we wish that every country in the world, from the third world, had an Aeroclub that was willing to go out and help the people and fly the injured or the sick out of their places to the community, to the hospitals. But the governments, they see it as their enemy. general aviation. And general aviation, they don't want small planes flying around when they're an approach to the big cities. But we in Guatemala, at least 65 or not 70% of the traffic in the main airport is from general aviation. And it has been growing steady every year, more than commercial aviation, because you can go anywhere in a small time, like, you know.
No, that is certainly, I remember that years ago with Jose Manuel, we actually reviewed general aviation in La Aurora Airport, and it was 80% of all movements. But going back to this question of government, Dave McClary has just a good question here. Even with permissions in Nicaragua, internal government communication was lacking. So key people didn't know what to do with our operations. Perhaps having a draft agreement for disaster service ready ahead of time might move things more quickly and would help governments to facilitate know-how. And that is something we at the World Bank, with the projects that Rohan just mentioned, should keep in mind, should put on the table when we are providing financial support to these governments, because in my own experience, when you bring money to the table, that's when government are listening. Any reaction? I mean, we don't have it in Guatemala, the agreement, and Captain Luding told us, well, you know, and then we have to perform and they don't pay us. It's, you know.
Well, I think you're going to get a lot of questions over there in your text over there. That would be, but one of the things is always in every country seems there is a divorce between general aviation and the government, people in government. A lot of people in power, they don't understand really what is what is going on, and it's kind of hard to go evolve in aviation. And aviation, I mean, there's a lot of every human like to take a ride up in the, like being a bird over there, but the systems in our countries and the laws is very difficult to evolve, to develop general aviation. Guatemala, we have been blessed with some of the authorities have been in power that allow us to move forward, but still kind of a parking brake on trying to move forward. But like in Guatemala, I don't see any program to develop general aviation. We find a lot of stumbling blocks every time we gotta move forward. From starting taking classes, you have a lot of, the law doesn't allow us to move forward. So if we want to progress there, had to be radical changes how we see the general aviation. We are not a threat. We are part of the developing of our countries. A lot of people see us as a threat or just for toys for rich people. This is just, you're not seeing the whole spectrum. And the other thing is, like Jose Manuel was saying, is everybody who was into those positions in power, they have limited time and their agenda has to be fulfilled in 4 years. So if you don't have a view, we do a lot of teaching for leadership in the mountains. And I take this example. When you grow up in this village that is in a bowl, what is your horizon is very limited. But if you take off in an airplane and you go 3,000 feet, your horizon expands. It seems to me like that's something that is happening for the people that come in the government. They have 4 years and they don't see the horizon of future 10, 20, 50 years. What Jorge was saying is we can plan on that and move forward, because the next person is going to take that position. He doesn't have that vision. He doesn't understand. He goes there just for the 4 years. So we need somebody who is going to put that, go 10,000 feet high, and your horizon is endless. We could do that. if we have somebody who can bring us to that level, but not just for 4 years.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting to hear. And I'm a member of AOPA Switzerland as well. I'm Swiss. And when I listen to them and I exchange information, it's exactly the same story. And Switzerland is a developed country. It's the same story. It's seen as a tool of the rich and famous. It's disturbing, it's polluting, makes noise, and there's no plan to support it. Until a year ago, the challenge was that we need 1 million pilots and mechanics in the next 15 years. Where are they coming from now? The aviation sector is down, but civil aviation depends on general aviation's provision of pilots. Just one important thing, because Air Force don't provide them anymore. But the story is the same everywhere. However, the Aeroclub does a lot of communication. Jose Manuel, you wrote in the chat, but maybe you want to summarize. You made a good point here before we start wrapping up. Jose Manuel, your intervention.
Yes, Charles, thank you. Ludin has all the reason. The problem here in our countries like Guatemala is that the position as a Director General of Civil Aviation Authority is not technical. It's 100% political. And when you put political things into a technical thing like aviation, you're making it dangerous, and you're stopping it, and they will not develop as aviation wants to develop. That's the big problem in our countries. For example, you can see that for the director of FAA in the United States, they don't change that person every 4 years, and that person comes from, we don't know where is he coming from. No, the person in charge of the FAA is a well-prepared person with a lot of experience in aviation, and they doesn't change that person every 2 years or every 3 years. They are technical positions, very important positions for the growth and security of safe aviation. That's the big problem in our country. It is a political position, not a technical position.
Thank you very much. Before we come to a wrap up and conclusion of this webinar, which by the way is recorded, and I'll send out the link so those who missed it can watch it. I would like to give all the panelists a final word before I summarize and formally conclude this very interesting webinar. And let's go back to the order. Last thoughts, last recommendations, last advice to the World Bank staff, what we can do to help the cause. Jorge?
Thank you, Charles. You mentioned something very interesting, that commercial aviation, they need general aviation because the pilots that fly the commercial, they need to be current in small planes, because the small planes, you need to fly everything. In the commercial, you only push buttons. But when there's an emergency, you have to be current in the small planes. And pilots, we love to fly. You need to have general aviation to make it easy for them to have associations like Aeroclub, where they can rent planes and keep current and just fly. Because in China and all those countries, they're always bringing people from places like, a lot of Guatemalans, they go to the Middle East to fly because there's a lot of culture of aviation. But in there, you don't have general aviation. So the pilots, they don't live in the world of aviation, and that makes it unsafe. And if you want to have a safety commercial, you need to live with general aviation.
Thank you, Jorge. Jose Manuel, last thought?
Yeah, Jorge say all the words, and another thing, if you see an airline pilot, he doesn't start flying in a Boeing 747. When he began his studies as a pilot, he started in a Cessna or a Cherokee, small one, with an instructor, and then after years, he will become an airline pilot. But without general aviation, you will never have that pilot, because you will never have the small airplane, the schools, aviation schools, and everything. So everybody says the big picture, which is commercial aviation. But as Ludin says, if you climb to see all the horizons, everything started from general aviation. So if you don't have general aviation, you will not have commercial aviation, because you will not have pilots.
Thank you very much, Jose Manuel. Very important point. Captain Ludin, your final thoughts.
Well, I just want to remind you and everybody who is watching this conference here that aviation is still a very useful tool for the development of our countries. And I was thinking about the presentation of Rohan here. I say there is a lot more work to do after this, the initial response of the disasters like the one we had in Central America. There is a lot of more programs had to be taking place, and how people are going to get to those places. You don't go in big airplanes, you go in a small airplane and small helicopters. So I think just take aviation as a very useful tool that had to be very skillful, the person who is going to use it, so that we operate very safe. But it's very important for us, especially in our countries. It's kind of hard to reach some of the areas where we focus our work on development. So it's not just as some of the articles say, just for the rich and famous. It's just for the poor and not famous too.
Thank you. Very good final words from Captain Ludin. Rohan, any thoughts from the World Bank side?
No, I think Charles and I have our work cut out for us to take this back to our teams, especially from the DRM side, and try and introduce some of these ideas into the dialogue, right? And try and see how we can sort of complement the efforts. And yeah, I just wanted to express special thanks to the Aeroclub for their missions and for their volunteering efforts, and also for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are 3 minutes before the scheduled end. We started on time, we'll end on time. But let me just, as a final word, summarize my takeaways. And as I said, the video will be available. We have heard from a very impressive response by general aviation to 2 hurricanes, natural disasters in Guatemala, with resources that are unprecedented in many countries, that have transported goods and medical equipment and saved lives. This was on the initiative of the Aeroclub of General Aviation. It was coordinated on the spot with authorities and is a very positive example. By contrast, we heard the situation in Honduras and Nicaragua, roadblocks, and the difficulties to do the same. The lesson learned is that when there is general aviation that is actively lobbying, the red tapes are less. For us, the World Bank, and our business is development, we need to keep general aviation in mind when we talk about aviation sectors. Agreements ahead of natural disaster may help, but what is more important, what I take away, is the constant sort of recognition that general aviation needs to be facilitated. It doesn't have to need to be taxed out of existence or burdened with complicated administrative red tapes and procedures, but it has to be seen as an important infrastructure of a country. And if that is the case, then everybody will benefit of it. And as Captain Ludin said so nicely, general aviation is not for the rich, it's for the poor. With this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. We are ending exactly on time. May I ask Jorge Ludin and Jose Manuel to just stay online? I would also like to thank my colleague Emmy, who did in the background all the machinery, the recording, which you now can end.